Corentin Strelu. I'm looking after our French business, and I'm going to be your host for this track one of the breakout sessions. Our first session is about intelligent advertising. So we're going to be taking a deeper look or closer look into our buy-side platform. Without further ado, let me introduce Pankaj Lakhotia, my colleague looking after our product. Please welcome Pankaj.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for joining our breakout on intelligent advertising. So intelligent advertising, what is it? Sounds pretty simple, right? Earlier today, some of you had the opportunity to hear our chief data scientist, Catherine Williams, lead a great discussion with our panelists on how machine learning is really changing the heart of programmatic media buying. Oh, thank you. Laying a better path towards better outcomes for advertisers and publishers alike. So for the next hour or so, we wanted to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about how we're using machine learning at AppNexus to make our platform more intelligent from a buyer's perspective. You're going to hear about some products and features that we've been working on for quite some time and that some of you are testing in our closed beta. And seeing some pretty good results. You're also going to hear about some new products and features that we have under active development. But to kick things off, where we wanted to start was to give you more insight into how AppNexus is addressing the growing challenges of a complex supply ecosystem. I think you guys all heard some reference to that in a couple of breakouts, or a couple of panels earlier. And before we end, we'll be joined on stage by our co-founder and CEO, Brian O'Kelly, who will have an interactive discussion with you, give you an opportunity to ask him some really tough questions. He loves tough questions, so rock him up. Cool, so we got a lot of content to cover. We're going to get started. I'm going to hand the stage over to my colleague, Katie Buzby.
I think this is
mine. Oh, got it.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Katie Buzby, and I'm a product line manager overseeing supply on the AppNexus platform. Now, thinking about supply from a buyer's perspective right now is really interesting, as we're seeing a ton of really seismic shifts in the programmatic landscape. We've talked about the rise of fake news and heightened advertiser sensitivity as to where their ads are being placed. We have really sophisticated botnets starting to siphon advertiser dollars away from the properties they're intended to go to. And then finally, header bidding is completely changing the game in terms of how inventory can be accessed programmatically. So a number of the sessions this morning talked about brand safety and fake news, but let's dive into that access point a little bit deeper. So when I assumed this role as the product line manager looking over supply on the platform, my first project was to define the AppNexus supply landscape. And so what I sought to do was understand the gaps and overlaps in our supply coverage. I really wanted to make sure that our buyers had access to all the programmatic supply that was fit to buy out there in the ecosystem. And my ingoing hypothesis when I kicked off this project was that there were going to be some gaps in our supply coverage that we would need to fill, whether that be through a direct relationship with a publisher or a relationship with a supply partner. But we found out something a little bit different. Sorry, that was supposed to be up there. In fact, we were dealing with a pretty serious oversupply problem. So take the United States, for example. 38% of the top domains in the United States were being sold by 11 or more sellers. It was pretty outrageous. On top of that, 22 of the top most popular domains in the United States were sold by more than 30 sellers. And this problem really wasn't isolated to the United States. We analyzed 6 other geos across EMEA and APAC, and every single one had some element of redundancy. Maybe not as severe as the United States, but certainly something of concern for the buyers on our platform. So, what causes this redundancy? What's making this happen? And it's really closely tied to the advent of header bidding. Take a single impression, for example. When that's sent to multiple pre-bid partners, they're then sending that impression to their DSP partners. And so this multiplication through the header and then multiplication again causes a complete proliferation of supply. And it makes it really difficult for buyers to navigate their programmatic buying. Think about if you're buying an impression through one path versus another, you actually wind up competing against yourself and driving up the price of your inventory because of self-competition. Also, as a buyer, I wouldn't really know what to make out of all of this noise that's happening in the ecosystem. If I think I'm buying one impression, but I'm bidding on it 64 times, it gets really confusing and difficult to unwind. So we created a framework for our buyers to start understanding the value of their supply intermediary partnerships and the supply that they are buying. It's really closely aligned or inspired by Maslow's hierarchy of needs from psychology. And so for those of you who aren't that familiar with psychology and maybe didn't take it in college or in university, Maslow's hierarchy of needs outlines the core things that a human being needs to survive. That's placed at the bottom of the pyramid. And as you move up the pyramid, the human gets more and more sophisticated. Once you reach the top of the pyramid, the human's basically at their optimal state. And so we've taken that and applied that to supply and programmatic. We place quality at the bottom, then robustness, transparency, and efficiency. And each of these layers of the pyramid has either product investment or a machine learning investment or a policy investment aligned to it to drive us towards that optimal state for our buyers. So let's dive into quality. Quality basically means that we are guaranteeing for our buyers no invalid traffic or audiences. We place this at the bottom for a very, very deliberate reason, as we see this as a kind of table stakes need for programmatic exchange. I think this is an area that AppNexus really shines through their machine learning, or our machine learning capabilities. A great example of this is our response to the methbot. Is everyone familiar with methbot? Does everyone remember that? Awesome. Okay, good. It happened right before Christmas. It was not the greatest Christmas present, but so it happened right before Christmas, and it was a really sophisticated botnet that was estimated to have impacted the ecosystem to the tune of something like $180 million. I'm happy to report that AppNexus's exposure to methbot was less than 500. It was basically negligible. And so I asked our inventory quality team, what made the difference for AppNexus in terms of our resilience against this really sophisticated botnet? And they said, it was a function of two things. One, the strength of our direct publisher relationships, and two, our data science capability and ability to understand the programmatic landscape and analyze impressions for what we may believe is fraud and use that on an ongoing basis to continue to learn about how these, innovators are gaming the system. So that was really powerful. So once you have a baseline quality supply or quality ecosystem, next is robustness, and this means reliable and resilient access to all the supply that's fit to buy in the ecosystem. And so we're making a couple of investments here to make sure that our OpenRTB integrations work as expected and are reliable for our buyers. Most notably, we're starting a couple of initiatives to analyze bid requests from our OpenRTB partners to make sure they're properly formatted and have all the information our buyers need to correctly decision on them. So this is really important, and again, we're really looking to drive buyer success here on quality supply. We're constantly building up this pyramid. Next is transparency. So that's full visibility into both what you're buying and who you're buying it from. We're making a couple of investments here beyond your standard domain detection and audit practices that we've been doing for a couple years now. The biggest announcement here is our kickoff of our publisher relationship declaration and audit process. And what this is going to aim to do is verify the direct relationship between a supply intermediary and the publisher that they're claiming to represent. So we're really looking to end, the practice of unauthorized resale that's happening in the industry through this, and allowing our buyers to buy with confidence and allowing our buyers to buy from who they actually expect, so there's no surprises at the end of the day. And finally, after quality, robustness, and transparency, we have efficiency. And this means securing the most efficient and direct path for our buyers so their purchasing power is maximized. This is backed by a product investment that we call Supply Path Optimization, or SPO, that seeks to identify a redundant impression before it's auctioned in the open exchange. And again, you'll remember that that redundancy is fueling the self-competition among a buyer, and that's driving up CPM. So we're really excited about this investment. Let's take a look at redundancy trends on the platform and why supply path optimization has been so important for us. If you take a look at this graph, this shows impression avails on the platform. The blue area is the impressions that are RTB eligible. The orange area represents impressions that were deemed redundant by our supply path optimization algorithm. So you'll see, in the absence of a supply path optimization algorithm, we would have seen more than doubling of supply on the platform in less than a year. So it's pretty outrageous how fast this proliferation has happened. And I'm really happy to report that AppNexus was able to get ahead of this curve and start understanding this trend on behalf of our buyers early on, beginning as early as July of last year. So we just went over the 4 product investments aimed at driving buyer success on our supply. Let's take a look at how that kind of all layers onto each other for a single auction. So now we have a single impression. It can be sent to multiple partners through the header, and it's going to go through a series of 4 checks before it's eligible for auction in the open exchange. The first is the inventory quality check that we covered. The next is that check for robustness, so making sure that it's properly formatted and you could be successful as a buyer when you attempt to bid. Finally, second to last, almost there, is the publisher relationship audit to make sure that you're buying the inventory as directly as possible. And then supply path optimization, and again, that's finding the best path to supply on your behalf. So once all those checks are completed, an impression would be eligible for open exchange buying. And so through these kind of 4 gating initiatives, we're looking to establish this really clean, easily transactable pool of supply for you all. And so on top of that, Richard's going to present the investments that we're making in our buy-side platform.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Ready to listen to get into under the hood at some of our investments we made on our buy side? Yeah. So let's see. There we go. So the idea here is that Katie just did a great job of presenting how we're creating a clean, safe, transparent, and robust supply marketplace, really for our buyers. In conjunction with that, we made a number of investments in our buy-side platform to deliver marketing outcomes for our buyers more efficiently on the backs of a completely revamped optimization system. So in order to walk you through some of these features and functionalities that we've come out with over the last 6 to 12 months, and also to talk about some of the functionality that we're coming out with later this year, I'd like to take you on a journey. Basically, a journey about how a buyer might interact with our platform and where our optimization system meets what they're inputting into our platform. So the first thing a buyer might think about as they're looking to traffic and budget media in a buying platform is how much supply is available to them and at what price. So will this platform actually support your needs that your advertiser gives you? So this is a really hard problem in the RTB marketplace, and one that we're working on. So fortunately for us, one thing we have is the market-leading publisher forecasting technology, YieldX. So we're applying that technology directly to the RTB marketplace to give our buyers a more accurate visibility into what types of, more accurate visibility into how much inventory you have to buy at what price against any targeting parameter that's available in our campaigns and line items. Sorry. One more thing to note there is this product is under development. We're going to be releasing this for video first, probably early in Q3, because we think that's a marketplace that has some of the biggest needs around actually forecasting. Next, we'll move into other channels. So once you have confidence the AppNexus platform can deliver your budgets at the price you're looking for, you'll move into the buying, setup, and planning phase. And the idea here is AppNexus has revamped its buy-side workflow. So in the past, AppNexus supported four levels of object hierarchy, including a campaign object below the insertion order. The idea here is buyers were not able to completely rely on our optimization system and had to break out multiple campaigns under the line item level in order to effectively achieve their marketing outcomes. We now have built an optimization system that just works, so we don't believe a number of these manual hacks and workarounds are necessary. So we're streamlining our workflow to that end. So let's start with the flight plan, the seamless I/O. So this is a new workflow for budgeting on our platform that's aligned with your business goals. It's also a single view for all your budgeting needs. So as advertisers renew their budgets with you, you're able to input additional billing periods into one object in order to retain the optimization data that you have gathered by already executing budgets for that buyer. Next, it also automates the process of setting up daily budget caps for you. So in the past, buyers or traders on our platform would have to actually manually enter every day how much budget they want to spend on an I/O. Now we're automating that process. Next, you're getting into the phase where you're actually planning your targeting and optimization strategies and tactics. So this is how you'll use our augmented line item. So you might actually ask, what is the augmented line item? So I'm actually curious, have any of you guys actually used or seen this product? Heard about it? Intrigued by it? It's kind of been enshrouded by a lot of mystery, I think, on the AppNexus platform. And so what actually is it? Is it an easy-to-use UI to achieve your marketing outcomes? Is it an optimization engine? Is it a tool for advanced traders? Is it a tool to protect you against evolving auction dynamics? Well, the answer is, of course, all of the above. So let's work through it. So an easy-to-use UI. So when you're navigating into the augmented line item and looking to set up your core KPIs and optimization tactics, it might not look that much different to you than the traditional AppNexus campaign setup. But there's a huge shift in actually how we're thinking about it. So in the past, buyers would set up campaigns and input KPIs and have to manually tweak them or break out new campaigns in order to effectively hit their KPIs. Now that we've built an optimization system that just works, we believe you can enter your KPIs and let our system run. So if you listen to the presentation that earlier in the presentation, Brian was talking about what confidence do you need in order to let the car drive itself? This is effectively you letting us drive your car for you. Next, the augmented line item allows you to just buy marketing outcomes. So when you navigate into actually the booked revenue and buying strategy phase of the workflow, you'll see that if you set up a VCPM booked revenue or a cost plus booked revenue, you can buy just on views. So you can pay just on views. This is a major innovation for us. So it actually allows our buyers to only pay for an impression when it's viewed on our platform, using the power of our viewability prediction algorithm on the back end. So this is just the first iteration of actually what we're calling exchange-traded media products. So the idea behind this work on our end is allow marketers and buyers to come onto our platform and just buy outcomes. So we're starting with views and display. We'll move to views for video in Q3. And beyond that, we're also thinking about video completes and clicks. Next, as you're finalizing your setup of the ALI, you'll want to set up your creative components. One thing to note about the augmented line item is it's designed to be cross-channel and support multiple different formats. So in order to effectively let our buyers do that, we're investing quite a bit in how we're allowing buyers to buy against multiple channels. So for instance, for native, we've invested in a new buy-side workflow. In the past, when buyers needed to execute native budgets against our platform, they would have to build creatives that complied with different seller requirements, and the process for doing this was really difficult. They'd have to go look on wiki pages and see what the requirements for Taboola were, what the requirements for share-through were, what the requirements for Legatus were, set up creatives, hit go, and hope it actually works. Now what we're actually doing is as you build your native creative in our UI, we'll start exposing what sellers this creative is eligible to serve on based on the inputs you're putting into our system for the different elements of native creative. And if you're not eligible to serve on one of our native sellers, we'll actually tell you why. So maybe your description is too long, and we'll say, hey, you can't serve on LinkedIn inventory because your description is too long. Cool. So that's the front end. That's how you set up an ALI on our platform. Next, when you hit go, our optimization system hits the ground running. This is what we think should give you the confidence to actually let our car drive. So the way we think about media-based programmatic optimization at AppNexus is among 3 pillars: allocation, valuation, and bidding strategy. So the idea here is find the right impressions, value the impression appropriately, given your goals, and then efficiently spin your budget. So we've deployed data science and machine learning to address each of these problems individually in order to give you better marketing outcomes. So let's dig in a bit. So around allocation, a major problem our buyers had, or a major problem across the programmatic landscape, is how much inventory is out there when you're buying against RTB. So what our buyers had to do is actually spend tens of thousands of euros or hundreds of thousands of euros on behalf of advertisers in order to figure out what inventory actually worked for them before they could have confidence in setting up campaigns that were optimizing against the right inventory. We've automated that process with our discovery algorithm. Essentially how it works is we're looking at historical performance across inventory on our platform. And when you start the line item, we'll start buying against the inventory that's performed the best across our platform historically first. If it works for you, we'll pass it into optimized. If it doesn't, we'll fail it quickly and move on. So the general point is find inventory that works for you quickly and quickly fail inventory for you that doesn't work. And I've been involved in some of the tests we've run around the augmented line item and how this has actually really improved how buyers actually achieve performance. And it's something like when a buyer puts in a reasonable CPC, I've seen them hit their key KPIs within 2 to 3 days with a fresh start. I know in the past, those have often taken months of learning across our platform in order to understand what inventory to target. So this is huge. So next is a situation you run into where you found enough inventory through discovery that works for you. And so you need to decide how much to spend on going out and finding new, potentially performant inventory, and how much to spend on inventory that already works. So the idea here is we're introducing an algorithm to dynamically control this allocation. If you're buying against optimized inventory and hitting your budgets and your performance metrics, we'll prioritize exploit inventory, but still buy a little bit in explore in order to potentially find some new inventory that could work even better for you. But as your budget moves into delivery concerns, we'll start adding more inventory into the explore bucket to make sure that you don't risk under delivery. So that's what we're doing around allocation: discovery, and explore, exploit. Next is valuation. So how do you value the impression in front of you? So basically, right impression, right price. This is a really hard problem to solve. And this is really where the core of our machine learning research is going into on the buy side, is how to do valuation. And because it's such a complicated problem, we're working at breaking out this problem into its component parts. So when you think about the value of an impression to you as a buyer, it's really your key KPI, your goal, times the probability of that event occurring, the probability of that goal occurring. So for instance, for a conversion event, we're actually breaking that event down into 3 different probabilities. One is the probability of a click given the inventory that the user is on. The next is the probability of a click given user frequency and recency data. And finally, the probability of a click given a conversion. So, or the probability of a conversion given a click. So the idea here is we're deploying different algorithms at each of these problems to handle them separately in order to give you a better long-term outcome. So that's valuation. Next is bid price pacing. So what we're doing here is solving the problem of sleep pacing. In the past, on the previous version of our platform, if a campaign wasn't delivering, if a campaign was over-delivering or above its ideal spend curve, we'd shut it down. The problem with that is when you shut the campaign down, there could be inventory, users' impressions that are valuable to you that you're not buying on. So we scrapped that idea, and we're actually dynamically shading your bids in order to budget. So what does that actually mean? What that means is if you're hitting your budget delivery, we'll shade your bids down until you're in danger of not hitting your budget delivery, and then shade them back up all the way to your expected value if necessary. And essentially what that means for you as a buyer is during that phase where you're actually bidding below your expected value, so we're confident you can hit delivery, and we're cranking your bids down, the difference between your expected value and the amount we've cranked down is your profit. So it's really a margin maximization tool for our buyers. Finally, we don't intend to be a black box. So we know there's a lot going on in the back end. We're telling you to trust us, and we'll just hit your KPIs. And right now that's generally working, but our clients do have a lot of questions for this product. As we mentioned earlier, it's in a closed beta. And so during this alpha beta process, our services, data science, and optimization engineering teams are monitoring algorithmic performance for things like what is our bid price pacing modifier, how much inventory is in Explore, how much is in Exploit. We're looking to expose that to you as a buyer. So the idea is if you're under-delivering on your line item, is our bid price pacing modifier appropriately accounting for that? So that's generally optimization. So in summary, allocation, discovery, and explore exploit are the two tools we're using there. Valuation, so breaking the problem of optimization into its valuation, into its component parts, and applying advanced machine learning against each of those components. And finally, bid price pacing. So bid more efficiently by shading bids down when you're meeting delivery. Next, I'd like to talk about actually how we're thinking about advanced traders helping our machine learn. So in the artificial intelligence panel, if you guys attended that earlier, talked a lot about how humans need to work better together. Humans and machines need to work together in order to achieve optimal marketing outcomes. And so our first go at this is actually introducing a concept called splitters, which allows our buyers to essentially jumpstart our optimization algorithm by prioritizing targeting aspects of an impression that they have found in the past to be performant for them. So say your advertiser is Barclays, and they found that users in London who are logged into Chrome converted at a higher rate than anyone else. So what you could do is set up those targeting parameters as a budget split and prioritize that budget split up front for us. So we'll, to basically speed up how we're optimizing for you. Next is a topic that touches more along the lines of what Katie was talking about, and that's evolving auction dynamics in our ecosystem. The key point I want to make here is the fact that as you're running our augmented line item, this is going on in the back end as well. Specifically, we're using this supply path optimization algorithm to direct you to the most direct route to supply. And we're also doing bid shading in the case of header bidding auctions where there's not a clear second price. So supply path optimization, Katie covered that at length. General point here is we're routing your bids to through the most efficient route to an inventory source. Bid shading is a concept that we're actually thinking about and working on right now as we confront a rise in first price auctions due to the fact that header bidding exists. So in a header bidding auction, we found that there's not really a true second price reduction occurring. But our system is built for the second price model, and our buyers are booking budgets expecting that price reduction. However, first price auction logic theory teaches you to shade your bids down below your expected value when you're bidding in first price auctions. So essentially what we're doing with the bid shading is translating your second price-based bids into first price-based bids. That's a relatively new and complicated topic, and I think we'll have Brian out for Q&A, and he can expound on this a bit further. Finally, you might ask, is our platform still open and extensible? And of course, the answer is yes. This is AppNexus. So we're continuing to invest in our programmable bidder product. So if you have a data science team, unique user insights, custom algorithms you want to deploy on our platform, you're able to do that. And we're actually improving and investing in how you can do this. So I talked a little bit about how we've broken the valuation problem down into its component parts. We're exposing those component parts to our buyers to actually overwrite those prediction models with their own prediction models. And so you can kind of mix and match which component you want to use or completely overwrite our optimization system. So in summary, we don't actually have a slide of all the features, and I was going to try to memorize them, but I thought that it's actually not. It would be very difficult. I think 7 is the most digits you can memorize at one time, most pieces of information, and this is going to be more than 7. So in summary, this is what we've covered so far. These are all the investments we've made in our buy side over the last year. So supply marketplace, finding new quality supply, robust supply, transparent supply, and efficient access to supply. Forecasting for RTB, seamless I/O, augmented line item, which includes a simplified UVI, also a revamped optimization algorithm that includes discovery, explore, exploit, new valuation algorithms, bid price pacing, splitters, a tool to allow traders to actually influence how we do optimization, protection against evolving auction dynamics, such as supply path optimization and bid shading. And finally, we're continuing to invest in APB. So in sum, you all know that the programmatic ecosystem is full of difficult, interesting problems. I hope you think they're interesting, because otherwise you should be in a different field. And our approach to solving these problems is a data science-centric approach. So with that, I'd like to bring on our CEO, Brian, to answer any additional questions you have about all this content that we just threw your way. Thank you, sir.
All right. I took my suit top off, so now I'm in product question answering mode. That's how you can tell. All right, so I think we have, I left the tie on, you're right. So I think we have mics. Happy to answer any questions about anything you just heard or anything you didn't. But you have to raise your hand and use the mics. There's a hand back there.
Yeah, hi there. Alan Stewart from Jagex. So basically, one of the challenges we have is optimizing for CPA is a red herring. You know, you can bring CPA down over time, but of course, not all acquisitions are equal. So cohort A over here may be worth significantly more than cohort B over here. So sort of like ROAS bidding in terms of return on ad spend might be another way of looking at it. But then, so how the programmatic platforms bring this kind of like view on incrementality and being able to optimize using machine learning towards the most incremental conversions in terms of what their CPA is versus what their specific return is for those incremental cohorts, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We actually have a couple of clients testing optimization to incremental conversions today. There's a bunch of complex data science problems around how to do that in a statistically relevant way. One thing I'm really excited about the identity announcement earlier is it gives us a much higher likelihood of actually doing incrementality on a people-based ID, not on a cookie. Because the challenge here is we're looking at how often someone is exposed to ads. If I create a A/B test or a test control group, and I say this cookie is in the control group and that cookie is in the test group, what if they're both you? Now we've completely screwed up our exposure metrics. So I think identity was really, really important here. What I'm hoping for is that we'll see some of the attribution vendors join into this identity coalition and provide that back into the ecosystem. So that's one. Two is we need a way to ingest some kind of either cohort-based or incremental ROAS that we can then use to drive optimization. One of the the sort of consideration models here, where you can actually plug in a component, is a CPA value model. You could upload a tree, or you could build a logistic regression that predicts the value of an A, to your point. And so you could say, when we're running the real-time optimization, how likely is this user to have a big cart value or a small cart value? And that flows all the way back through the optimization process. Now, those are only available through the APB interface today. We do plan to build more and more of that into the core ALI workflow, but we actually need partners first. So we're not going to do attribution ourselves, at least anytime soon. So we do need to find partners and vendors who are able to feed that data back in. So for right now, it's just big marketers who have made those investments themselves and are actually able to give that incremental idea back into the system. And that question is going to get asked every year for about 4 years until somebody cracks it. But we're making progress. Up here. You've got to have a mic, though. I'm sorry. It's the rules.
Just on the topic of price shading, do you think we're getting close to the end of the second price auction, or is there still value in it?
Great question. This is a active and vibrant debate that we have often. I think that the idea that we have second price auctions today is pretty much a fallacy. What we see today is really layered auctions or tiered auctions, where if the core decision is a waterfall, it's not even an auction. So if you're using DFP or another legacy ad server, everything is sort of hacked into a priority-based waterfall queue. And so we can layer auctions on top of that. My fear is that any auction on top of another auction just obfuscates the bids and allows, especially intermediaries, to play games with soft floors or other mechanics. So I think really the best thing for the industry right now would be to move fully to a first price auction. Now, some of you may have read a blog post I wrote last summer where I said, doing a first price auction or soft floors in the header is evil. You should be shot. I was wrong. I will say that in front of you now. I actually think the right way to do this is that the header layer should pass through all bids. There should be no auctions in the header at all. And so any auctions on top of the final auction just confuses the process and allows games. So I'm saying that every layer, other than the last layer, should be a full pass-through. And if you happen to have a unified auction, like you do if you're using the AppNexus Publisher Suite, where the header is fully integrated with RTB and fully integrated with Guaranteed, then we can talk about running a second price auction. But in any other scenario, including with Google and EBDA and all that baloney, we have to just say, pass through the first price, pass through the bid, let the waterfall or final auction decide. And I think you may or may not be seeing a blog post from me on that topic presently. We may or may not be rolling out features to test exactly this. Look for bidrequest.at equals 546 in AppNexus bid request starting next week to play with exactly this mechanism. We're pretty sure that that's going to be much better for buyers and sellers. I did not plant that question.
Hi. You're putting a lot of efforts in auto-optimization strategies, and then there is APB. Is it worth for an agency to work on its own optimization strategy if probably you have better tools and better understanding of the technology and can do better probably in a short period?
That's a great question. So I think that if you look at the way we approach this, just looking at the previous question about incrementality and ROAS, we have no internal data science work on that today. And we probably won't for a good period of time. And in fact, if you look at the broad set of optimization opportunities, we're only working on a very targeted set, where we think we have a distinct advantage because we have this very large data set. So things like predicting viewability. We think because we actually see 11 billion ads a day, and we actually measure 5 or 6 billion a day, that we can do incredibly accurate viewability predictions that no one client can do as well as we do. I think clicks are similar. And one advantage for clicks is we don't have to share data across buyers to do click prediction, because the publisher sees the clicks as well. So on behalf of our publisher partners, we can do scaled click prediction. When you get into CPA or ROAS or other more complex optimizations, it's much more tied to the attribution system, to measurement, and there's actually a lot more human interaction. You may have a case where a human client says, I don't like what you're buying, even though the results are really good. Machines don't understand humans. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for agencies to create new media products. For instance, we've seen a lot of time of engagement optimization. We've seen people using Moat and other metrics to drive outcomes. We've seen things like Nielsen or other metrics being used into showing advertisers what's working. That's just not on our roadmap. So I would say if you're trying to outpredict us on clicks or views, you're not going to have great outcomes. But anything beyond the very small set of things that we think we can do really, really well, we're going to give you a platform where I think you should invest. And I think it's fair to say that if you're in the agency business and you're not investing significantly into ML and AI and technology, you're going to be at risk from a whole set of new entrants from the consulting side of the landscape, the IBMs, the Accentures, and others, who are going to come in and offer a much fuller suite of technology products built on top of platforms like ours. So I think it's a defensive investment, and I think it's also going to drive a lot of value for clients, even if we do have a bunch of data we can use to solve parts of the problem. I think I saw another hand somewhere over here.
Hi. The session started with the supply of inventory coming into the platform and the quality of it. And one of the aspects of quality that I'm experiencing is that it is very hard to get new domains audited, virtually impossible. And the story always is that there are new rules, and they came from you. And I trust that, and I believe that, and I also believe very much in the importance of inventory quality. But the outcome today is that it is virtually impossible to get new domains audited in the first place. So how can we bring more inventory, and we could discuss about the quality of it, into the platform if we can't even get to that very first gate?
It's a fair question. So going back a couple of years, when we started to really investigate the quality of supply in the platform, one of the things we learned is that the #1 vector for a bad actor to get inventory in the platform was from brand new domains. And if you look at these in Alexa or similar web, what you'll see is domains that have almost no traffic, and then all of a sudden they start sourcing and buying traffic, and they have a spike in activity. And so the problem for us is that if we audit a domain and then the publisher starts dramatically changing the mix of traffic, we have a really hard time policing. It's not bad content, it's bad traffic. And so the way we actually stop that activity, which I would consider almost like domain arbitrage, like basically get a domain audited, do something bad, wait till we catch it, and when we do, shut the domain down, move your crappy content somewhere else, source traffic there, do it again. In fact, there's an Exchange-ware article, like how to make lots of money doing content arbitrage, and exactly that. So what we realized was that there are actually not that many quality domains or quality sites or apps created on a daily basis. And certainly there are media companies that launch new properties, and what we're kind of waiting for is for a buyer to say, I want that traffic. And what we found is that if we stop auditing new domains for a month, buyers don't notice. We have 568,000 domains that are audited on the platform today. And I have absolutely no problem auditing new domains, but the risk profile for us of adding new domains is significant. So we probably add a couple hundred a month, and if you look around, we're always looking at the traffic patterns we see. So what percentage of overall traffic is covered by the domains we've audited, and what are we missing? And what we find is that when we're missing traffic, it's often from very sketchy domains. That's not to say we only audit quality domains. We try hard to. So if you have a new property you launch, if you believe it's going to meet our quality requirements, please do submit it. But more importantly, find someone who's a buyer who says, I think that domain should be on the platform. And we're very responsive to buyers looking for new inventory.
Yeah, but I wasn't actually speaking about new domains, but about clients that I'm trying to persuade to come off of Google and onto us and AppNexus. So it's existing sites that have been around for a decade. And you mentioned Alexa. So in a very small market like the Netherlands, anything in it wouldn't even show up in Alexa because we haven't got enough people, literally.
I think
so then it's hard to get it audited, even to be considered for audit.
Totally understand. And I think our challenge is we do not understand the Dutch market necessarily. However, we have a bunch of clients in the Netherlands that do. So one thing that's easy for us is to say, hey, you know this market better than we do. Help us understand. I think we're very responsive. I think so when clients are referring domains to us, it's a lot easier for us to trust, our clients and partners. And so let's, absolutely talk about how we can get more coverage in the Dutch market than we have today. I'd say the same for any market where, we may not understand why these 200 sites are so important and valuable, but we have, Sanoma, Greenhouse, Banner Connect, many others who can say, yes, of course, this is a trusted partner. These are great domains. Let's get them onto the platform.
Fair enough.
All right, who else? This is your last chance. Ask me anything.
Hi. One of the features mentioned is buying on a vCPM. How do you think that that's going to affect pricing overall once you've offered that in the platform?
That's a great question. In our test so far, what we found is that most buyers, and actually most publishers, are factoring in non-viewable impressions into their overall pricing. So to give an example, if my overall price point is £1 and I'm 70% viewable, that means that my clients are paying about £1.30 for viewable CPM. So I would expect a viewable CPM to be sort of proportional to the viewability. For publishers, as long as it goes up by a third, then it doesn't matter that I'm not getting paid for the non-viewable inventory. Publishers are smart. If they see prices increasing for viewable impressions, they will find ways to redesign their sites and apps to increase viewability. Right now, there's not enough of a penalty for non-viewable impressions. And so what we find is that above the fold, highly viewable inventory is worth more than below the fold, but not enough to justify turning off the below the fold placement. So I think what we're doing is, by moving this from an average viewability, where we say, oh, that site's not good, its average viewability is 50%. What that really means is you have one above the fold unit and one below the fold unit. Now we're saying we're going to pay full price for the viewable one and nothing for the non-viewable one. It means for buyers, actually more access to inventory because it's fine-grained. And for the publisher, they're going to start asking questions like, why do I want that unit down there if I never get paid for it? So I don't think we'll see major dynamics in the market change. I do think we'll start influencing site design and broaden the ability of buyers to trust more sites that aren't particularly viewable on average. Anybody else? I can't really see because there are bright lights in my face, so there might be 100 hands out there. I'm just not saying. I think one over there.
Hey, Brian. Oh, yeah, everyone can hear me. We heard the announcement here about the data consortium, and I thought it was really interesting how having live intent or like an email provider, the kind of benefits that would provide. You kind of touched on it would be your hope, that third-party verification partners might get involved in that in future as well. Could you kind of dig into that a bit more, and specifically what kind of benefits they'd add in the consortium?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges we have for everything we do now is that we all get graded on what the measurement says. So we may think we drove incredible ROI for a buyer, but if it's not counted by the end ad server or attribution provider or measurement vendor, we don't get any credit. And so one reason we don't get credit is, when we see this often, is that if that end attribution source doesn't have the same cross-device map that we use, then we say, we think this mobile impression drove a desktop conversion. And they say, no, it didn't. So imagine then if we all had the same built-in graph and the same sense of cookies. Now we could say, okay, we definitely saw, shared user ID ABCD go on the mobile device and then go back to their laptop and buy something on the train. We all share that same common understanding. And that means we can now optimize based on the data that we have. And so that to me is a really, really valuable change to the marketplace. I do think it's a big risk that DCM is by far the dominant buy-side ad server. I don't know that third-party attribution companies have been successful standalone. Most of them have been bought. And so if you really want to see end-to-end outcomes, we need everybody in the same cookie space, everybody in the same people ID, and this is a big step toward that. But you're right that we need all the different media types here. We need native, we need email, we need video, we need mobile. We need everybody to all work together nicely. I'll even say mobile for you. But we have to make this work. And so my biggest hope is that we announced it today, but that over the next few weeks, we get all of these folks together to do it. Where you can help is if you can encourage any vendors or partners that you work with to get in touch with us or MediaMath or LiveRamp to join this partnership. Because I think the more of these companies we have, the more critical mass, the more likely that we have zero discrepancy attribution and targeting and everything else to make our ecosystem broadly as transparent and frictionless as, let's say, Google's.